Good morning, traders, and welcome to the weekend update. I'm doing this a little bit earlier here. I'm doing this on Saturday, October 11th, again, because I am in Athens, Greece. I'll be heading up into the countryside a little bit later today. I'm not sure what internet's going to be like up there, so I wanted to go ahead and get this done. Obviously, Friday was a fairly monumental day, and as I had mentioned in my previous weekend updates, we were in a pretty good uptrend here. If I were to come in and basically draw this particular line on, let me get my drawing tools working here. If I were to come in and look at this trend line on our chart, we were moving along pretty darn well. However, I also have said all along that news can derail this, and it derailed it in fashion here on Friday. The question is it going to be prolonged or not? So we did, as I had mentioned in last week's session here, I had mentioned that if we pulled back, I was expecting to pull back right into that 6,500 range. I didn't think it was going to happen unless some major news event broke, which obviously it did. We did come right back to that 6,550 point, and we'll have to see what happens there because we did break this particular trend line that's been in place for quite some time now. And also, if I look at volume here, it was on a little higher volume, but the volume wasn't as strong as the days that we've had significant up volume. So a little unsure as to exactly what that is going to mean for us. And as we know, in the world of our politics right now, things can change in a flash. If something gets semi-settled over the weekend, if a tweet comes out that things are being backed off of a little bit, there's a number of different things that can happen that would cause this decline to stall. Of course, there's also a number of things that can happen that might speed this decline up. Other countries could now chime in and say, hey, we're not going to honor our tariffs, etc. Again, it's a political event that who knows where that might land. So let's just take a look at our different indexes here. Of course, SPY is going to be virtually the same. I want you to notice, though, that it is still remaining inside this long-term blue channel that goes back quite some time here. So not extremely onerous at this point, but obviously still a nearly 3% dip in a single day, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at. The ES, very, very similar in nature. We noticed that it came all the way down to just a little below that 6550 range. Again, an area that I would have expected possibly some stalling or consolidation, and it bounced off of that a little bit prior to the close on Friday. So that was somewhat encouraging. But look at the volume bar here. So on that down day, this volume bar was quite huge in our S&P futures market. The futures markets tend to be traded a little bit more by professional traders. So this tells me that the big money, if you will, is a bit more concerned than your average retail trader that might be trading SPY. If we look at volatility, I haven't looked at this yet. I'm going to guess we're going to see a sizable increase in volatility, and yes, we did. So, but interesting, we come back right to this, what I'll call this consolidation area. I can't draw a very straight line here this morning. It's about 5 o'clock, but we can see that volatility came right back into that 21, 22 range. This green line I had previously drawn as an area where volatility largely hadn't exceeded that in the past. And I think I could actually probably drop that down just a little bit from where it's currently drawn. But the key is that volatility gets up into that area and many times will stall. This is the reason that I went ahead and I started personally on the very limited time I had on Friday, doing a couple little trades that are volatility focused. It's a good time to consider trades like maybe a butterfly or a condor. Of course, only defined risk trades. But at the time like this, when volatility spikes, that's when I can get, as an insurance seller, that's when I can get more premium for those types of trades. But of course, I would only do a defined risk trade in that type of environment. So looking at the Qs, we're going to see similar story here, but this trend line here that has been in place for quite some time, we didn't blow through that on the way back. So that's also somewhat encouraging here, at least for the time being. But it also pretty big down volume day. So those are things that have to keep in mind on this. If we look at the volatility here, my guess is that it might not have peaked quite as much as SPX. Yeah, it actually was a little bit higher, probably in the same range. Now, this whole thing that happened here, those of you that have looked at charts for a long time, you might see things like this from time to time. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this is simply what's called a bad tick. So somewhere along the line, something got in here that said, oh, volatility was all the way down at 9.2. Well, volatility hasn't been at 9.2 in forever. And these are also probably some sort of bad tick. So I don't pay attention to those types of things when they occur. I consider this whole tail here to essentially be meaningless, particularly on a day when volatility was up significantly. So don't let those fool you into thinking, oh, sometime during the day, volatility dropped significantly. So I don't have a solid explanation for why these are occurring from time to time, but at the end of the day, they're not something that I would pay attention to. We take a look at IWM, very similar story here, big dip. This one fell out of that channel. IWM, as I had mentioned, has been the weaker of all the indexes. It did come up here to this all-time prior high, which is where I was expecting some resistance to probably come in anyway, some chopping sideways, if you will. And ultimately, if this chopped sideways for a while, or even down where it is right now, if this just chops sideways in a bigger range here for a couple of weeks, this is one of my favorite patterns called a cup and handle. And again, if this chops sideways, I'm thinking that we could get an explosive move out of a handle here at some point in the future. Not too distant future, probably by the end of the year. But of course, that's going to be news driven at this point. We're going to have to see how this holds up. And of course, we're looking at volume here. So volume pretty significant there, but it didn't peak over this up day. And that wasn't even a huge up day here, but that up day where we kind of gapped up into this channel some time ago and gapped up right near these all-time prior highs. So that had still higher volume than what we have here. So wouldn't necessarily call it a bullish sign, but it's something that gives me a little bit of a hope that if, of course, news fades on this or something gets resolved from the news standpoint, that this should stay in this general sideways range chopping, hopefully creating a handle for me. The volatility index on the RUT, not quite as high as the others. Again, also slightly, I hesitate to use the term bullish at this point, but it's not exceedingly bearish yet at this point. And gold, I don't know what to expect from gold. I would think that gold would probably have moved a little bit higher in the uncertain situation, which it often will. And yeah, it did. So on Friday, we can see that gold opened down here at 365. It closed the day up around 370, somewhere in that general range. So gold also is holding up just fine. And when you have uncertain times, from my day, gold was your safe haven. I will say that many times nowadays, people go to a cryptocurrency for that safe haven. I'm not even going to sit here and talk about that because I don't know anything about it. I just can't wrap my head around how do you value something like that. I can value a company by looking at their fundamentals, which of course gives value to the S&P 500, etc. I know those companies have value. They have assets. They have names that are worth something like a Coca-Cola, etc. I'm not sure. Of course, gold has had intrinsic value since the beginning of time. Particularly as I'm here in Athens, Greece, it's very interesting to see how gold has been used for literally thousands and thousands of years. And I know in current times, younger people consider cryptocurrency to be that potential future value. I'm not here to say it is or isn't. I don't know. I don't know enough about it to make a claim, but I can rely on the fact that gold has had intrinsic value for thousands and thousands of years, and cryptocurrency has been around 15 years, 20 years, somewhere in that general range. So again, at the end of the day, I just can't speak enough on that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the weekend update here, and I will do one next weekend as well. That will be probably from the island of Santorini. I'll look forward to seeing you all then, and take care, everyone.